and welcome to all of you. Today, it's quite an interesting day today on account of two things. Number one, the topic that we are going to discuss, and number two, the person who's going to be bringing the topic to you, to life and to you. I have the pleasure and privilege of introducing to you Mr. Andy Neilson, procurement practitioner from Twisted Orange. He's the founder of Twisted Orange, in fact. He's been in procurement practice and teaching for over 30 years now. Now, today he'll be discussing with us a topic that is often probably, kept a bit aside in this region, that is SRM, Supplier Relationship Management. Because other than those really very, very large companies or the medium to large size companies, others don't seem to be really focusing on it. While the fact is that even if you're a small scale company, an SME, if you have focused on SRM, if you have your suppliers with you, it can really make a big difference in your growth as well as in your bottom lines. So I guess that would be what Andy would be talking to you about. As usual, I keep forgetting things. So today I forgot to introduce myself. My name as it comes below is Dr. Ramesh Menon. I'm working in Hayford. I work here as a trainer in the subject of supply chain related subjects, including procurement and supplies and other aspects of the supply chain. So we talk about those a bit later. Right now, I'd like to hand over the proceedings to Mr. Andy Neilson. Andy, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much.
I forgot to mention, today we are not following a typical, a slide and description model. Mr. Andy has given us the freedom to ask him questions. So it's like a panel discussion that we are having this. So I leave the floor to Mr. Andy Neilson, and I also request each one of you to ask him topics or specific questions, which I am sure that he would answer in the best possible manner. Over to you, Mr. Andy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all well. So I think that the first thing to really discuss is what is SRM and what does it really mean? And I find it quite strange that in everyday life, we form relationships, we rely on relationships, and we foster them and work very hard at relationships outside of work. And yet, as soon as we seem to, as soon as we cross that threshold and move into the office, and this isn't obviously for every situation, but the focus on money or speed to market or the next new thing or the next new iPhone or whatever the goal is, relationships seem to get put to one side, which I find really, really quite odd. Certainly when it comes to procurement, simply because the strength of your supply relationships have a massive positive or negative impact on your ability to actually do your job. That's certainly my opinion. I think Dr. Ramesh has highlighted it in his opening speech very well, that SRM is this underutilized and perhaps to a degree misunderstood activity. People, again, in my experience, almost liken it to a massive transformation program, but it's not. It's what we do every day. And I'd like to think that the majority of people would agree that you get better results from stronger relationships than you do from perhaps adversarial relationships or weak relationships. And it doesn't matter what size of business you are. You haven't got to be a Microsoft or an Apple or a Tesla or Aston Martin or Ford to work with your suppliers in a relationship-focused manner. And I appreciate that there are perhaps some cultural differences around the world when it comes to relationships. But the one thing that I've found in working in the region, in the Middle East, is actually there's a huge emphasis placed on relationships and getting to know each other. But then when it comes to commercial activities, it's almost a race to the bottom in terms of cost reduction, rather than perhaps innovation and value realization. Because, you know, in my 30 years of procurement, I'm not sure that I've particularly come up with any great ideas on my own. I've utilized both my teams and my suppliers. You know, whether I was working in fitness and leisure or food or retail or manufacturing, you know, I was working in a shoe manufacturer, global retailer. You know, my expertise was in that particular business. You know, transportation or logistics providers were the experts in what they did. And I think when it comes to relationship management, we, as procurement people, need to listen more than we talk. We need to ask questions and listen to the answers rather than tell suppliers what it is we need them to do. Suppliers of any category or commodity are experts in their own fields. That's why we use them. So I find it very strange when procurement people tell suppliers, this is how you will work. This is how you will think, almost. Because I don't think you get the best results from that approach. The most commercially astute, perhaps, the people that I've had the privilege to work with in procurement, or the clever ones, as I would kind of classify them as, are very focused on being supported by their supply base, by listening and engaging. And I think if you take one thing away from today's session, perhaps it's about reflecting on how you are open to suppliers, how much time you invest to your supply base, how long it takes for you to reply to an email, pay the bills, whatever that particular activity may be. And I'm not saying we can treat all suppliers in the same way, because obviously some suppliers are more, I guess I'll say more important, that's the wrong word, more impactful on our respective businesses. And with anything, we always focus on the key suppliers, and that's where SRM really adds value, in my opinion. So, Dr. Amesh, that's really, I guess, my opening statement of what SRM means to me. I'm not sure if you had any specific points or questions, or whether there's anything from the audience.
From the audience, I mean, any questions that you would like to add on to it? Because I really don't know your individual backgrounds, you know, like your industrial sectors, or the nature of the businesses that your companies are into. So any queries that you could come up with, any questions that you would like to ask? Mr. Abdullah, Mr. Abir, Salija.
So I guess as we wait for questions,
let me kick it off by asking a question from my side.
okay.
You know, when we talk about SRM, Now, when we talk about the relationship metrics, we always say that on one hand, and we have the CRM, the other end, we have the SRM, we have the internal processes in between. So how important are the internal stakeholders in successfully delivering SRM?
I think with everything around procurement and organizations, internal stakeholders are critical. It's about clarifying with them what you need from them, and also I guess when you look at a RACI of stakeholder management, you're always looking to clarify who's responsible, accountable, etc. And I think that the key one around a RACI is it's the informed. I think stakeholders want to be kept informed of progress, but ultimately they want to see benefits. And the best way to engage with internal stakeholders is to be able to demonstrate the potential benefits of an SRM program in the organization, i.e., why would we invest in relationships instead of just getting the cheapest cost? And therefore, you're moving into realms of quality of product, continuity of supply. I think, again, just based on my own personal experience, lots of organizations found out the strength or the weakness of their supplier relationships during the COVID pandemic, because suppliers had to make decisions with limited supplies of which customers they could deliver to. And I think, again, like I said, I've seen many examples where customers, organizations were shorted on deliveries simply because the relationship wasn't there. The suppliers did not regard that customer as a key customer, even though the customer regarded them as a key supplier. And I think that this is where you get the mismatch in the management of that supplier. And I'm pleased to say that, some of the organizations I work with recognized the fact that they did not have strong enough relationships in order to guarantee that supply of product into their manufacturers, into their retail outlets, whatever it may be. And SRM had a bit of a positive boost post-COVID, simply because people recognized the fact that they needed to do better with their supply base. So in answer to your question, Dr. Ramesh, I think internal stakeholders, one, they're always important when it comes to procurement, but two, they're vital when you're trying to introduce SRM as a new methodology. You need the mandate from above to convince people around you that the business gets it and is supporting this different approach, because it is different to our normal cost control, etc.
Absolutely true, because this is a challenge which I too have faced. I've spent a lot of time in healthcare and a lot of time in industrial electronics, like measuring systems and all. So in both these, where measuring systems, I didn't face too much of a problem because the company was based in Germany. Here, what happens is we play a very short-term game. The outlook is very short-term. Like if there's an ISO inspection, okay, let's shift to the ISO specified brands and whatever. The moment the inspection is over, let's go back to the cheapest.
Yeah.
This doesn't help because number one, again, I'm just continuing the conversation that you kicked off, that, it always helps to invest a little bit more into developing an SRM with the vendors, because if you have a 5-year view on this, then you find that the figures at the end of 5 years are more or less same, because if you total up the returns, the rejects, and the customers lost because of poor quality, if you add all these up at the end of 5 years, it may have been cheaper to have paid 5 or 10% more to a good supplier with whom you have a good relationship, rather than buy the cheapest from faraway places.
Yes.
So that's a very valid point, because I faced it myself in my profession. So, hi, friends. I mean, the guys attending. I mean, any questions from your side, we welcome, because the more questions that come in, the broader is the perspective. We get a thing from each. I mean, different sectors.
Okay, I see we've
Anyone
got a
from
few
the
questions, so do you want me to answer those?
yeah? Anyone from the trading sectors? Because in trading, there's a very critical issue. SRM, because if you have a good relationship with your customer, although you may feel that he's more expensive, he'll take care of your quality, which is a big thing. Okay,
Yes.
so let me ask one more question, because
Okay.
there were quite a few things that I had wanted to ask Mr. Andy. So,
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt, Dr. Ramesh.
yes, yes.
If you can check the Q&A, people have asked the questions over there and on the chat box as well.
Oh, is it?
Yes, I can see
Oh,
those.
great.
I'm
Oh,
happy to
yes,
answer
I
those.
can now see that in the chat box and Q&A, both are there. I'll start with the chat box. There is one in the chat box. Hey, thank you for this. Hosts and panelists. Okay, there it is. Can you please highlight some of the lesser known but important performance metrics for supplier assessment? That is one. And the second one, and you may have to write this down, or I'll repeat the question later. As procurement professionals, do you think we should have separate relationships in terms of giving importance with the suppliers as per their level of impact on the business?
Yeah, I think they're both really good questions. I think in terms of performance metrics, the thing for me is that they work both ways, and it's very sector specific. So manufacturing, obviously a typical inbound KPI or performance metric would be on time in full. So, how many times the supplier delivers your exact quantities on time. By the same token, one of the supplier's KPIs on their customers should be, how accurate are their payments, and how many days are you late, or but I think so KPIs and performance metrics should work both ways. That's my first point. But I think in terms of overall SRM performance metrics, it is very category specific. But I think typically, if you take a key supplier, so a business critical supplier, I would like to see a full quarterly business review and a full annual business review. I think one KPI is, or one performance metric is, how often do those happen? How quickly do problems get resolved? What is the innovation percentage of realization? So how many ideas or initiatives are raised in a certain period? How many are progressed? How many succeed? How many fail? Not as a negative, but as an indication, if you like, of level of interaction and business. Let's face it, everything started with an idea. Everything started somewhere in somebody's mind. Typically, the best ideas come from collaboration. And with a supplier and a customer, you've got both sides of those levels of expertise. So the customer knows the market, the supplier knows how to make products or deliver a service. So rather than do it in isolation, innovate together, innovate through collaboration. And I think there are performance metrics around the amount of output or the amount of investment or the amount of effort that suppliers and customers can do that. In terms of the second question, I think that's really a segmentation piece. So how do you apportion or prioritize your relationship management program? You cannot treat every single supplier the same way. You would need millions and millions of procurement people to do that. So as with everything, in procurement, we focus on the business critical suppliers, the people with the most potential positive and or negative impact on our business if things didn't go correctly. And this is where we need to ensure that we are focusing our SRM efforts, because typically 80% of value will be with 20% of your supply base, and that's where your SRM focus needs to be. Not always, but that's our normal procurement Pareto. Answer the questions. Always happy to come back or to receive further question on that if you like. I can see we've got 2 other questions. I think you're still on mute, Dr. Ramesh, sorry.
Yeah, from Mr. Jawad, can you please briefly explain a standardized SRM in manufacturing industry?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what that question is trying to ask, to be honest. So standardized SRM, I'm not sure. There's obviously logical steps. There's a program around SRM. There is the opportunity to bespoke an SRM program to any industry, whether it be manufacturing or service related. The key thing around SRM in an organization is it is consistent with the suppliers that you deem it appropriate to work with. And it needs to be, if you have 10 buyers in an organization, they all need to be more or less the same in terms of their approach when it comes to SRM. And I think that's sometimes forgotten. I guess it's when you ring a call center with an issue that actually you always expect the same answer whoever you speak to, and that should be the same with SRM. But again, perhaps if you could add some further context to the question, I may be able to add a more appropriate answer. The second question is around inconsistency of performance. And at what point do you change your SLA? I don't think you should change your SLA. I don't think that's really the answer. I think if you have a supplier with inconsistencies in performance, you need to be able to address those with the supplier through your SRM program, or your SPM, supply performance management. But you certainly do not wish to change the service level agreement because of a poor performing supplier. You need to be able to work with that supplier and understand where the issues may be. And again, this is where you're investing in relationship management. This isn't just about telling a supplier off because they haven't performed. This is really saying, here are the issues that we've got. Can we work together to address them? And it may be something that's incorrect in the data. It may be something that you as a customer are doing inadvertently that means the supplier can't perform. A good example, quite an odd example, is when I was working in the food industry, we were delivering to 2 different customers, and who had depots right next door to each other. And we should have been delivering to one depot at 7 o'clock in the morning and the next depot at 8 o'clock in the next morning. The trouble is, as a supplier, we had the times the wrong way around. So we were late for every single delivery with one customer, and they were stood at their depot watching the lorry deliver early to the next one. So it can be a really simple issue, but until you have the ability to understand what that issue is, so root cause analysis didn't take long when it came to the fact that we had the wrong slot information. So no, I would never advocate changing the SLA simply because of poor performance. It's about understanding why that supplier is performing to less of the or below the required standard. And in terms of, we just had a clarification on the standardized SRM. So
SRM in steps in manufacturing industry.
yeah, there is an SRM program. There are logical steps that you can take. The first step is ensuring that the business and the function and the stakeholders are all aligned with, we are going to implement an SRM program. Because until you get that mandate and the understanding, but you're also providing the detail of the benefit, chances are you won't successfully implement SRM in any industry without that support. And yes, there are, I'm sure there are many different programs. I have my own. We all have our views on how we implement a certain way of working. Segmentation, so working with the suppliers at the appropriate level in the appropriate way. It's also then about, right, what does SRM really mean? What should our benefits be? What do we need to do to support it? Investment, training of procurement people, because relationship management doesn't always come as naturally to some as it does to others. And we need that consistent level of understanding, knowledge, and, dare I say it, skill set when it comes to dealing with people. And let's be honest, we're all people. We deal with people. AI hasn't taken over completely yet, thankfully. So we are people. We buy and we sell to and from people, and relationships in business are tricky at times, and people need support. Things don't always go right. People fall out, sadly. Relationship management is about, how do you have those conversations, those awkward conversations, without it becoming a shouting match or an argument? How do you maintain objectivity? So SRM program is a logical step. Ultimately, the first step is always the mandate, the vision. The last step is around implementation, is, right, we've implemented it. Let's ensure that we are reviewing it on a regular basis to make sure that the benefit is truly there. Let's not just make it a one-off and then we all revert to type, and within 12 months SRM has become something sat in the corner that nobody talks about anymore. So I think it's, whatever SRM program you implement, or however you implement it, it has to be all-encompassing. It has to be communicated, supported, and recognized as a business initiative, not just a procurement initiative. I hope that answers the question, but going through an SRM implementation would take probably a lot more time than we've got.
That's true. And Andy, can I just give an example of how engaging suppliers in your activities in a manufacturing plant can really bring down your costs? Like I had this personal example where I had this manufacturing unit for laboratory equipment, a small desktop equipment, and we used to export it. And then each 20-foot container, we were able to load our full equipment in its packaging. We were able to load about 128 pieces. Then one day, our procurement guy had this good idea of bringing in the packaging development guy, packaging vendors, the suppliers, packaging material guys, and showing them what we do with the material. So he looked at everything, and then he said, you should have told me earlier that these are export packings that you put in a container. So then I asked him, what difference does it make? He says, I'll help you with more compact packing, which is much more shock absorbing, because it should not, shock isolation was the main criteria. And true to his word, within 24 hours, he had the standardized shock-proof packing, density packing, which he provided us. And this went up, per container thing went up from 128 pieces of equipment. It went up to 164. We were able to cram in nearly 35% more into one container thanks to the reduction of the size. So this is what a proper SRM can do. I mean, these are one of the examples, like you said. I mean, it's a huge session by itself. So
yeah, I think for me, lots of customers feel, excuse me, that they naturally command being regarded as a key customer. That's not always true. In lots of situations, the customer is possibly not as, say, affluent, big, size, large, whatever the words are. The customer is a lot smaller than the supplier. And whether it be during a pandemic or whether it be any shortage of commodities or materials, like I said, the true strength of your trading relationship is based on the fact that that supplier still wants to trade with you. And I call it customer of choice. If a supplier has a choice, which customer does he choose? And I think we've got a point around in terms of a business operating in a high risk area and difficult to find reliable suppliers. Well, this is where SRM really comes to the fore, because you need to have suppliers that want to work with you at all costs. And that's about how we treat suppliers, not just commercially, but in terms of our relationships. If you go to 2 retail stores in a mall, 2 clothing stores, and you get really shocking service and poor attitude from the staff in one, and then you go to another and you get the most fantastic customer service, but the products are slightly more expensive, where are you going to go next time? I would suggest I would go to the slightly more expensive, because the service is better. It's more reliable. It gives me confidence, the fact that they're treating me in an appropriate manner, rather than just treating me as you're just a customer, we don't really care. And people may not agree with my views on that, but I'd rather pay slightly more, both in terms of perhaps product cost or service cost, to guarantee supply in the times of crisis. And also, it's not just about the cost, it's about the investment in the relationship, because SRM takes time. SRM needs that support from a business perspective, because you need the business to appreciate that the time invested is obviously costing money. So it's SRM can pay so many dividends, if you like, in terms of benefits. And I think organizations miss out so much, or perhaps when they reach that crisis point where, it's difficult to find suppliers or difficult to maintain continuity of supply, that's when people go, I wish we had a better relationship with that supplier. So why not be proactive and ensure you have got those positive relationships before things go wrong? Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after. So we can't be in control of that. But what we can be in control of is our supply base and how they regard us. And ask them. Ask your suppliers what they think of you. And don't be afraid of the truth, because otherwise if nobody tells us, it's like when we're grown up as children, if we do something wrong and our parents don't tell us, we'll do it again and again and again. And it's the same being a customer. If we keep doing things wrong and the supplier doesn't tell us, we will keep doing that same thing. We'll keep going to the wrong delivery points at the wrong times. So for me, like I said earlier, the best procurement people that I've worked with listen and ask open questions in terms of, we want feedback. We want you, suppliers, to tell us what we could do better. Where do we add waste? Where do we annoy you? Where do we frustrate you? Where do we have an opportunity to improve ourselves? And I think if you get answers from your supply base around that, then that demonstrates a very strong and healthy relationship.
There's one more question that has come in, Andy. I'm not very sure of it. Ms. Abhi, you had written contents. So what exactly would it be? If you could just, elaborate the message. It's really wonderful. Currently it just says contents.
Okay, so whilst we're waiting for that, did you have any other questions, perhaps, Dr. Ramesh?
Yeah. Okay. Since no one's asked, can you say that given the current and recent challenges, relationship management has not taken a backseat? It's just being able to do business. Is that it?
Yeah, I think you see organizations who say, oh, we're struggling, or the world economy is being negatively impacted by this, that, and people seem to stop relationship management, or they seem to just go back and revert to type and say, oh, we just need to save money. Well, the best way to save money, the best way to ensure continuity of supply, like I said, is actually the reverse. Invest more in your relationship management programs, because that's where you will save money. That's where you will make a difference in terms of your margin, or what you can then offer to your customers. Suppliers have absolute nuggets of gold in their minds, in their businesses, and they really come to the fore when the pressure is on. So SRM, rather than being discarded or paused or put to one side when people are demanding cost reductions and we need to save money, let your suppliers help you. Don't be afraid to ask. You'll be amazed at the response that you get. And you'll be amazed at the outcomes when things become prosperous again, because you've strengthened that relationship with that supplier. You look at joint collaborations in manufacturing, for example. So I play golf, and Red Bull Racing in Formula One, obviously very successful. They've chosen to align themselves to tailor-made golf. Now, that's not come through by accident. That's not come through by, oh, perhaps we'll just do something together. That's about relationship management, saying we can align ourselves and provide mutual benefit through brand alignment, brand awareness. And this is where very clever marketing people come to the fore. It's no different in relationship management within procurement. It's about aligning. It's about collaborating, because we can't do everything. Otherwise, if we could, we wouldn't need a supply chain. And we'd probably be more magicians than we would procurement people. So we need suppliers. We need innovation. And innovation and collaboration drives efficiency. And efficiency drives cost down. So at times of crisis, I would advocate that relationship management becomes even more important rather than, oh, let's just focus on making it cheaper, because you end up going down quite a slippery slope of not being able to get back to an SRM program, because all the suppliers you've kind of discarded will go, well, what? Hold on a second. 1 minute we were, flavor of the month. Then you told us we had to do things cheaper. Now you want to go back to what we were before. It doesn't quite work. So if I ask one thing is, at times of pressure, don't revert back to just simple procurement transactions. So.
Okay. There's a comment that is coming from Ledger. Going by the global unrest across the world and its impact on supply chain management, where your supplier is from, one of this country affected in this situation, how do you manage the situation such that its impact will not be visible in your operations?
I think it's a really good question. It's obviously a very relevant question. Certainly with the events in Ukraine and the sad events this week in the region. Sometimes it's very specific to the category and the commodity. Sometimes that there isn't an answer that's positive or palatable. If a supplier is from a country that is going through a period of unrest, then this is where your supply chain contingency measures may well kick in. So from a manufacturing perspective, we're looking at safety stock, we're looking at dual sourcing of products. And I think that's, if something happens overnight, COVID, etc., then the ability to manage that risk is challenging. We cannot predict the future. Nobody can predict the sort of things that have happened in the last 2 to 3 years. Excuse me. If a material or a service or a commodity is business critical, then I would like to think that a degree of safety stock and contingency in the supply chain has been built, and or alternative sources have already been sourced, whether it be ready and waiting for eventualities, or typically actively supplying from to suppliers. That's not to say that it just doesn't work sometimes. We look at automotive in terms of the electronic components that were in short supply, vehicles being delayed, lead times going up to 6 months. So if global car manufacturers struggle at certain points in time, then I think it gives some good context, the fact that, sometimes we are going to struggle. There is no single answer that says, this is what fixes it. What you can state, again, in my opinion, is effective relationship management will do everything it can to address the issue. It will ensure that you are maximizing the opportunity to address the short supply. It will allow you to understand where your risk is as well, because relationship management is not just about talking between each other. Relationship management is about understanding where the risk also lies in the relationship. And for any business critical supplier, you should have a risk plan or risk strategy or countermeasures, if you like, of what if they stop supplying? What do we do? What's our alternatives? And I think that's the key message around, that's just general procurement. If you have a business critical product, you always have to look at yourself and go, what if they didn't supply? What if they have a breakdown in their supply chain, factory fire, whatever it may be? There's a recent, this week in the UK, local airport had a massive fire in the car park. 1,200 cars have all been destroyed. So, from an individual perspective, people are now having to look at contingencies about how they can get to work and back. So we have many examples of contingency and risk management. And whilst we can't address every single one because we don't know what they will be, SRM will at least allow you to ensure you've done everything possible just in case, which is probably not a very good technical term, but it's probably appropriate for these troubling times that we're in. There is only so much you can do. SRM, in my opinion, allows you to do everything possible you can do, but it's not an answer for everything, because there are certain things we can't control.
Let me just see if there are any more questions. Just now from the chat.
Yeah, there's a follow-on saying, how should we balance supplier risk? So I'm assuming that when you say how we should balance supplier risk, that both the customer and the supplier will not seriously be affected in such risk. You're talking about taking mutual responsibility for that risk within the supply chain, perhaps between the customer and the supplier. And again, I think that's the benefit of relationship management, is you have those conversations. So if you as a manufacturer are dealing with a supplier that supplies a business critical product, the first thing I would ask them is, what does your supply chain look like? How are you managing your suppliers to ensure that you can supply to me? Because let's be honest, supply chains can be quite convoluted and long. They're not just simply buying from that one supplier. They're buying components. They're bringing in labor. They're bringing in expertise. So when you're dealing with business critical suppliers through an SRM program, you want them to do the same thing to their suppliers, because ultimately, if you are using precious metals, perhaps, and the mine who is mining those precious metals suddenly stops work, that affects the whole supply chain, and ultimately will affect you as a customer, whether you're first, second, third, fourth, or even fifth in the supply chain. It doesn't really matter. If you stop river at a source, it's going to affect everybody who relies on that river. I'm not trying to be evangelical with these phrases, but it's about context, isn't it? You need to go to source to understand where the risk in your business is, and that's where SRM, in my opinion, really adds significant value, because it allows you to ask those questions of your supply base. It allows you to understand, because you have that trust between each other. And I think trust is an underused word when it comes to relationship management, sadly. We all need to invest in our relationships to make our jobs and our lives easier. And we have lots of people trying to complicate it. Procurement is not complicated. It's not technical. I know you've got technical categories, but it's not. There's two things I always say about procurement. It's relationships and common sense. And if you can form relationships, and if you have a degree of common sense about you, chances are you'll be a pretty good procurement practitioner. But we have to listen. We have to challenge. we have to be able to realize benefits from relationship management, because simply sending an email, shouting down the phone, demanding cost reductions, that's not procurement, in my opinion. That's just transacting. That's just trading. And that's not what we're about as procurement professionals. Procurement professionals are relationship-based management practitioners, workers, deliverers, whatever words you want to use. Everything for me is about relationships. So when we're looking to achieve balance of risk or mitigation of risk, that's where relationships really come to the fore, in my opinion.
Let me see if there are any more. Okay. So to keep other thing going, just one more question that springs to mind. The word innovation is a widely used one. So what would it mean in relation to supplier relationships? Innovation and supplier relationships.
Yeah, I probably touched on before, and I'm just obviously conscious of time, but innovation is doing something different, doing something new. And we are surrounded by things that have been innovated or invented. And like I said, I don't think that any ultimate manufacturer, let's say Apple will not have been able to deliver the quality of product that they do through not innovating with their supply base. The first mobile phones were what, this big. They were kind of house brick size, breeze block size, for those of us old enough to remember. And now we're looking at phones that fold in half. So Samsung must have done something with their supply base to say, we're going to make a phone that folds in half. So innovation is a direct result of relationships. Because if you don't have a relationship, how do you generate innovation? How do you generate joint investment? Car companies are great, aren't they? I think when you look at car brands, we've got hundreds and hundreds of car brands owned by four companies, perhaps. So I drive a Mini owned by BMW, part of a massive group. You've got the Audi group with Skoda, Seat, VW, all these collaborations, all these innovations that take place are through relationships. All the things that we see on adverts on the telly or something that we see in the shops is through innovation and collaboration. I think, my again, I said, just conscious of time, my last thought on this is relationships drive differentiation in a positive way, if done well. Relationship management saves money, drives efficiency, encourages and delivers innovation and collaboration. And I think the stronger your relationships with your suppliers, the more successful your particular organization will be. And just as importantly, your life will become so much easier. Let the suppliers support you properly. Let them off the leash. That would be my recommendation. Let them run with ideas. Let them come to you with ideas. Let them think of you as the first port of call when they think, I've got a great idea. Who would it work with? Become that customer of choice with your supply base. And I'll guarantee, I am sure that you will be successful as a result of that approach. So I hope that's. Sorry, Dr. Ramesh, I think you might.
I'm on mute. Yeah, I think that brings us to the end of our time limit too. So, if there are any more questions, I mean, you can of course mail it to Ms. Fatima. we'll ensure we answer back. And any questions about supply chain? How, where can you do courses on this? What kind of, if any, you need any educational support on this? We are all here to
Yes,
support you.
all of these details will be shared to your emails. What courses we are offering, what are the options that we are giving at Hayford. And our trainer, Mr. Andy Neilson, will be the one to conduct these courses. So we'll be happy to help. Thank you,
Andy, I'm really
Mr.
sorry, but I mean, I'm really sorry, but there's one question that has come in, and I guess it will be bad manners not to answer it.
Sure.
Actually, the last
We
one.
can.
This one is Elijah. I am not able to pronounce your second name, so I'll learn it from you later. Forex has been a major barrier in the recent times in international trade. Suppliers have been threatened as a result of this. So how well do you think organizations should handle this issue such that it does not affect them?
I think it goes back to the other points raised, isn't it? It's currency fluctuations are a risk, and the strength of your relationship will therefore allow you to mitigate or manage that risk accordingly. If you have a weak relationship, chances are Forex fluctuations will be passed on. Depends on your service level agreement, depends on your contract, what's built in. Is there a fluctuation agreement? But again, at the risk of repeating myself, the stronger the relationship, the better able you are to deal with such risk or such implications, such as currency fluctuation.
So that brings us to the end of this wonderful panel discussion. I mean, I find the charm of having a relaxed across the table discussion, I mean, much more enticing than a very formal, slide and comment presentation. So thank you very much, Andy, for this absolutely wonderful discussion. I think all of us who attended this, would go away with at least some bits of new information. Some of us would know something, many of us would carry away something from this that would be useful. And like Fatima just said, for any further information, you be in touch with her, and we are all here with her to help you out. So thank you to all of you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Andy. Thank you, Dr. Ramesh. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.